Hey there, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, please hit that sub button and join the family. We're so close to 30,000 subs, and you can make that possible. Smash that like button if you enjoyed today's stories.
Disclaimer on reading materials. The stories are carefully crafted, altered, and embellished by our team. This is to abide by YouTube's policies on reading materials. We hold sole intellectual rights to these stories as original content. The plan was coffee. Easy. Neutral, low stakes. I met Justin on an app, and he seemed sweet in a shy kind of way. We'd messaged back and forth for a couple weeks, nothing too deep, mostly memes and vague plans. He told me he was a bit of a homebody, but wanted to put himself out there more. I thought that was fair. So when he asked if I wanted to grab coffee at this place called Bean There, I said sure. It's not far from me and has decent lighting, which honestly matters more than it should. I showed up 5 minutes early, just enough time to order a che and stake out a table. There weren't many people there, just a couple studying in the corner and some guy on his laptop watching hockey clips with the volume way too high. I figured we'd sit for maybe an hour chat and see if there was a vibe. I wasn't expecting him to walk in with another person, let alone his mom. At first, I assumed it was just someone he ran into, they happened to walk in together. But no, he walked up to me, smiled awkwardly, and then motioned to the woman beside him like I should already know her. I stood up, kind of waiting for an explanation, but she jumped in first. Hi, I'm Justin's mom, you can call me Barb. She said it like she was a chaperone or a tour guide. I didn't know what to say, so I just kind of nodded and smiled while wondering what the hell was happening. We sat down, me across from both of them. And I swear she took over the entire date before it even started. Justin barely said anything. Barb asked me where I was from, what I studied, what my parents did, what my intentions were. Yes, she said, intentions like it was a 1950s marriage proposal, and if I had any siblings. I tried to answer politely, thinking maybe this was just a weird overbearing mom moment and she'd leave after saying hi. Nope. She stayed the entire time. At one point, I asked Justin how his week had been, just trying to loop him in because he looked like a ghost sitting there. And Barb actually answered for him. She was like, "Oh, he's been good. He just started taking these online coding classes. Isn't that right, honey?" And Justin just nodded. Didn't even say a full sentence. It was like talking to a ventriloquist dummy. I tried again later, asking if he'd been to the coffee shop before, and again she jumped in, saying they'd been a few times, and how he used to get these massive caramel fraps when he was in high school. She launched into this whole tangent about his braces and how he used to wear fedoras, ironically, and I was just sitting there sipping lukewarm che and slowly realizing this was none of it. This was real life. The weirdest part was how normal they both acted like this was completely fine. No awkwardness, no embarrassment. Justin didn't even look uncomfortable. He just let his mom completely dominate the entire thing like it was an interview for a daycare spot or something. When the barista brought over our second drinks, Barb actually leaned in and asked if I was the dating type or the settling type. I didn't even know what to say. I was trying not to laugh, honestly, because it was so absurd. I kept looking at Justin, hoping he'd say something, crack a joke, maybe even excuse his mom or explain anything at all. But nope. Just a quiet smile and eyes glued to his sleeve like it had the answers. We were there for almost 2 hours. 2 full hours. I tried wrapping things up like 3 separate times. Said I had an early morning, mentioned needing to do laundry, even fake checked my phone and said my roommate was locked out. But Barb kept chatting, asking about my favorite holidays and whether I believed in energy compatibility, whatever that means. She even brought up zodiac signs. Told me Justin was a Pisces and very emotionally intuitive, even though he'd said maybe 10 words the entire time. Then she asked for my birth time so she could check our charts. I pretended I didn't know it. At one point, she asked if I wanted to see pictures from their last family vacation to Myrtle Beach. I said sure because at that point, I was just waiting for a meteor to crash through the roof and end it all. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through what felt like 400 photos. Justin in various tank tops. Justin eating corn on the cob. Justin asleep in a hammock. She narrated all of them like a proud grandma. I didn't even finish my second drink. I kept glancing at the clock behind the counter and mentally calculating how long I had to stay before it wasn't super rude to leave. I finally stood up and said I had to run. Barb actually looked disappointed. Justin stood up too and offered this barely audible, "Thanks for coming," like I was visiting him at summer camp or something. Then, as I was leaving, Barb leaned in and said, "Don't worry if he seemed quiet. He just takes a little time to open up. You're lovely." We'd love to see you again. And I'm standing there mentally circling that we, thinking, no ma'am, there will be no we. I walked out into the parking lot and just sat in my car for a few minutes in silence, processing it. Like, was that a first date or a parent-teacher conference? I texted my friend about it, and she didn't even believe me until I voice noted all the details. She said I needed to write it down, so here I am. That was the first and last time I ever went on a date with someone who brought their mom. I don't even know if Justin wanted to be there. Maybe she set it up and dragged him along. Maybe he liked it that way. Either way, I'll never know, because I blocked both of them the second I got home. Okay, first off, I wasn't even supposed to be on that date. My roommate begged me to go. She met Wendy at some art workshop thing and swore she was a good kind of intense, which now I realize just meant controlling as hell. I was tired, I had work the next morning, and I barely had enough clean clothes that didn't smell like fried rice from my part-time job at the food truck. But I went anyway because I hadn't been on a date in a while and figured it couldn't be that bad. The spot was this new-ish vegan fusion place called Saffron and Sage. All wood and dim lights and /$9 cucumber water. Definitely not my usual scene. I wear hoodies that still have last semester's stains on them and consider frozen pizza a delicacy. I pulled up in an Uber because my car was in the shop again, and when I walked in, I spotted her right away. Slick ponytail, expensive-looking coat, and the kind of posture you only get if you went to ballet camp as a kid. She didn't stand up or wave or anything. Just looked at me, tilted her head like she was already analyzing me, and said, "You're a couple minutes late." It was literally 2 minutes. I checked. So I sit down, kind of laughing it off, trying to reset the energy. I ask how her day was, and she gives me a 5-minute breakdown of how productivity is a reflection of personal worth and how she wakes up at 5:30 every morning to do breathwork and make spirulina smoothies. I don't even know what spirulina is. I nodded along like I did, but I was already thinking I might need to make this a quick night. Then the waiter comes over. This guy can't be more than 19, nervous smile, tiny notepad in hand. Before I can even look at the menu, Winnie closes hers and says, "We're ready." I blinked. I wasn't even halfway through reading the appetizers, but she goes right ahead and starts ordering for both of us. She says, "We'll do the baked lentil samosas to start. Then she'll have the grilled tofu with kelp noodles, and I'll do the jackfruit curry." At first, I thought maybe she messed up and thought I'd already told her what I wanted, so I jumped in like, "Oh, actually, I was still looking. Maybe I'll do the," and before I could finish, she puts her hand up. Literally raised her hand at me like I was a dog about to bark. Then she turns to the waiter and says, "She's on a new food plan, aren't you?" and laughs. The waiter kind of laughs too, but it's that confused. "Please don't make this weird for me laugh." Then she adds, "No bread, no sugar, no starch, right? We're staying focused." She winked at the waiter, like he was in on it. I wanted to melt into the floor. I hadn't said a single thing about dieting. I hadn't even told her what I liked to eat. I barely knew the girl. The waiter left and I sat there stunned, still holding my unopened menu like it might protect me from whatever alternate reality I just entered. She took a sip of her cucumber water and launched into this long story about how she used to be addicted to ranch dressing and how it ruined her gut for years. I'm sitting there wondering how the hell someone could be addicted to ranch, but she was dead serious. Then she started picking apart the restaurant. The lighting was too warm. The music was too obvious. The chairs were clearly designed by someone who never studied spinal ergonomics. I tried to change the subject and ask about her job, and she said, "Oh, I don't work. Work is for people who haven't built enough leverage in their life." I thought maybe she was rich or something, but no, she just had a bunch of investments her ex helped her set up and now spends her days coaching high performers. I asked her what that meant, and then she said she helps optimize the lives of emotionally stagnant people. I almost laughed because I swear she described half the population. She said most people are too addicted to comfort to reach their true potential. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there starving and comfort sounded really good right about then. The food comes and it's even worse than I expected. The tofu was all weirdly chewy and the kelp noodles looked like something I scraped off my shower drain last week. She takes one bite of hers and says it's uninspired, then starts cutting mine into smaller pieces and pushing them toward me like I'm 5. At this point, I'm not even pretending to enjoy myself. I try texting my roommate under the table to call me with an emergency. Wendy notices and straight up says, phones are a crutch for the emotionally avoidant. Like I wasn't allowed to have a moment of mental escape while she spoon-fed me vegan sludge. Then, while I'm picking at what might have been a carrot, she leans forward and tells me she's into reparenting her partners. What does that even mean? She said most people were raised in emotional scarcity, and she likes to help people rebuild from the ground up. I told her very calmly that I actually had a pretty decent childhood, thanks. She didn't even blink, said denial was one of the first stages of growth, and I'd thank her later. I was counting every minute at that point. When the waiter came back to ask about dessert, she ordered some raw cacao thing for herself and said, "She's done," while nodding at me. I could feel the poor guy's secondhand awkwardness radiating off his name tag. He just nodded and vanished. When the bill came, she snapped her fingers, literally snapped, and said, "I've got this. Consider it a coaching session." I didn't argue. I was too tired and too full of weird tofu to even pretend to care. We walked out into the cold and she gave me a hug like we just shared something sacred. Told me I had good energy under the layers and should text her when I was ready for step 2. I deleted her number before I even made it to the corner. Then I stopped at a gas station and bought a hot dog and a Kit Kat bar and sat on the curb eating both while rethinking every decision that led to that night.
Hey guys, really sorry to interrupt. If you're still listening, then you're enjoying the story so far. And if you are enjoying, then please hit that like button. That's all I ask of you. Thanks so much. Now back to the stories.
It started because I was bored and slightly tipsy in the middle of a Tuesday. That weird kind of mood where your brain feels foggy and you're halfway between wanting to nap and spiral. I just finished scrolling through my ex's Instagram stories like a loser, and for some reason I re-downloaded that cursed dating app out of pure self-pity. Not because I wanted to meet someone, but because matching with strangers for no reason felt like the easiest way to pretend I had something going on. That's how I found Akbar. His profile said he was into fitness, books, and sarcasm, which sounded tolerable enough. His pictures weren't bad. A gin selfie, a blurry photo with a dog that probably wasn't his, and one where he was standing next to a neon sign that said something dumb like "good vibes only." I swiped right thinking whatever, and we matched within 5 minutes. He messaged almost immediately. Something dumb but harmless like, "So what brings you here other than crushing loneliness?" And I responded because I was 2 drinks in and had nothing better to do. We talked for a bit, and by that evening, he asked if I wanted to grab drinks. I usually don't say yes that fast, but again, Tuesday blues. I figured I'd go for a drink or two and dip if he was weird. He picked this bar called Thorn, a slightly grimy hole in the wall with velvet booths and dim lighting that makes everyone look better than they are. I liked it because the drinks were cheap and the music was low enough that you could actually hear the person you were with. I got there first and found a corner booth. He showed up like 10 minutes later wearing joggers and a hoodie, which honestly didn't bother me because I didn't dress up either. His voice was deeper than I expected, and he smelled like cologne that came in a black bottle with way too many X in the name. We ordered drinks. He got some dark IPA, and I got a gin and tonic, and we started talking. At first, it was fine. Just regular, awkward first date stuff. He told me he was a personal trainer at one of those 24-hour gyms, and that he also ran a fitness account on Instagram. I asked him how he got into that, and he went off on a whole thing about optimizing the human machine, which was cringe, but whatever. He said it in a way that made me think he didn't take himself too seriously, so I let that slide. But the longer we talked, the more little red flags started popping up. Not the big dramatic ones, just those small little weird comments that start stacking on top of each other until your drink isn't cold anymore and your brain starts screaming. He said stuff like, "Most people who complain about their weight just don't want it bad enough, and cheat meals are for weak minds." At one point, I joked that I only go to the gym to stare at myself in the mirror and zone out, and he didn't even laugh. Just said, "That's what separates winners from spectators." Like, okay, sir, we're literally at a bar drinking on a Tuesday. Then came the part that threw the whole night into a blender. We were halfway through our second drink when I asked if he ever got weird requests through his fitness page. I thought he'd tell me about someone asking for feet pics or something. Instead, he shrugs and goes, "Not really, but I used to post gym videos of strangers sometimes. People love attention anyway." I stared at him, waiting for him to say he was kidding. He wasn't. He said it like it was totally normal. Explained that when he first started his account, he'd take videos of people doing funny or weird stuff at the gym. Bad form, bad outfits, someone falling off a treadmill, and post it with sarcastic captions. He called it Jinzu. He said it helped him gain followers quickly because people like to laugh at chaos. I asked if he got their permission first, and he straight up laughed. Said no one ever noticed, and even if they did, it's a public space. He actually said, if you're out in the world, you're content. Like he was quoting himself, like that was something deep. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt for 2 seconds. Asked if he ever blurred faces or took stuff down when people asked. He said no. Told me one time a woman confronted him because her friend recognized her in a clip he posted of her squatting in neon leggings, and he told her, maybe don't dress like that if you don't want attention. I just stared at him. He said all of this like it was nothing, like he was proud of it. He kept drinking and going on about how people are too sensitive these days, and how he was just holding up a mirror to society. I wanted to throw my drink at that mirror, honestly. At that point, the only reason I didn't get up and leave was because I was still trying to process if this guy was really serious or if I was being punked. But no, he pulled out his phone and actually tried to show me one of the clips. I didn't look. I told him it was creepy and a violation of people's privacy. He rolled his eyes and said, you sound like one of those Twitter girls who gets offended by everything. He even mimicked a fake whiny voice, then tried to backpedal with, it's all in good fun like that made it okay. I told him I wasn't really feeling it and was going to head out. He shrugged and said, you'll come around. Most girls do once they see the engagement numbers, like we were talking about a business deal. I didn't even say bye, just grabbed my coat and left. I walked to the train in silence, trying to remember if I told him my last name or anything too specific. I blocked his number right when I got home and deleted the app again. The next morning, I opened Instagram and saw he followed me. I reported the account and then just sat there staring at my screen, thinking about all the people out there who probably don't even know they've been filmed and turned into some joke for strangers online. I told my roommate she owes me a giant frozen pizza and a night off from dating advice for the next month minimum. So, I met Tanisha at a friend of a friend's game night, which should have been my first clue that things might get weird. I mean, anyone who gets genuinely competitive over Pictionary and calls people casuals for not knowing 5-letter synonyms is automatically on thin ice in my book. But I guess I was feeling reckless, or maybe just trying to pretend like I'm more open-minded than I actually am. She had this whole super confident vibe, like she walked into every room already knowing she was the main character. I'll admit that part was kinda attractive at first. We exchanged numbers that night, and she texted me the next day saying she had just enough social battery left for one dinner this week, and invited me to this Korean barbecue place she said she liked. I was down. Korean barbecue slaps, and I figured at the very least I'd get to eat something fire even if the vibe was off. She picked this spot called Moon Table, tucked between a tire shop and an abandoned vape store. Low-key sketchy from the outside, but the inside looked nice. Cozy booths, charcoal grills in the middle, warm lighting that made everything feel kinda cinematic. I got there first, which is rare for me because I'm usually the one running 5 minutes late. I texted her to let her know I was grabbing a table, and she replied with, make sure it's one with good air circulation. I'm not trying to smell like beef all night. That should have been red flag number 1. Like, girl, we're literally at a KBQ place. What did you think was gonna happen in aromatherapy? She showed up 15 minutes later, no apology, just flopped into the seat across from me like she was running on fumes. Said, I had to yell at this Uber driver for missing my street twice. People are so dumb. I kind of laughed awkwardly, trying not to immediately judge, but that was not the last Uber story of the night. We started off okay. Ordered some marinated short ribs, pork belly, and a few sides. I offered to help cook the meat and she smirked and said, no offense, but I don't trust people who flip meat too early. I took that as her way of saying she wanted to be in charge. Fine. I sat back and let her do her thing. While she flipped and grilled, she talked a lot. Like, a lot. I barely got a word in for the first 20 minutes. She told me all about her coworkers and how she can't stand most of them because they're lazy and don't understand hierarchy. She went on this tangent about how she'd fired someone at her old job for breathing too loudly in meetings, and I laughed because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She looked me dead in the eye and said, There's a way to breathe in silence if you respect the room. At that point, I started paying more attention to the meat than her stories. I was trying to tune her out without being rude, nodding occasionally, mostly focused on the sizzling grill in front of me and how good the food smelled. But then the server came over, a younger guy, probably still in college, asking if we needed any refills or extra sides. And that's when things got dark. She didn't look at him, just stared straight ahead and waved her hand in this dismissive little circle motion like she was shooing a fly. I tried to soften the moment by saying, "We're good for now, thanks," but she didn't even acknowledge the guy's existence. He walked away, and I could see him pause a little like he wasn't sure if he'd done something wrong. A couple minutes later, she said, "I hate when servers hover. Like, if I need you, I'll say something. It's not that hard." I nodded at trying to keep things neutral, but then she added, "Plus, why should I tip someone for doing the bare minimum?" I looked up. She wasn't joking. She continued, "Tipping culture is such a scam. Like, you want more money. Get a better job. Don't expect me to reward you for just existing." I blinked. I asked, carefully, if she at least tips when service is really good. She laughed. "No, that's when I make them earn it. If they're overly nice, I start asking for extra stuff on purpose. Water with lemon, then without lemon. More rice. Swap out sauces. Just to see if they're fake or actually helpful." I sat there trying not to look completely horrified while she proudly explained her whole method. She said she likes watching them sweat a little, that it's a test of customer service endurance. And then she added, "I used to work retail. I know the game. It's not that hard to be fake nice. I just don't reward it." I didn't even know how to respond. Like, I'm not gonna get into a whole ethical debate with someone who thinks tipping is optional like a Dan side quest. So I stayed quiet, thinking maybe she'd notice my silence and reel it in. Nope. She told me how she once left a single quarter as a tip on a $100 bill because the server took too long to refill her soda, and then laughed, like a full, unbothered cackle. The worst part, she really believed she was in the right. Like she was out here thinking she was the Batman of the dining industry, fighting back against entitled service workers one unpaid tip at a time. I spent the rest of the dinner avoiding eye contact with the staff. Every time someone came near our table, I felt secondhand shame. I tried to sneak a few polite thank yous in just to balance the cosmic scale a little. By dessert, which she insisted on ordering even though she doesn't do sugar, I'd mentally checked out. When the bill came, she grabbed it fast, scanned it, and did some calculator app math. She wrote down the exact amount, no tip, not even $1. Just drew a smiley face on the receipt and slid it to the edge of the table like it was a perfectly normal thing to do. We got up, and I lingered behind, pretending to adjust my jacket so I could throw some cash on the table without her seeing. I left $15. It wasn't even enough to make up for her nonsense, but it was all the cash I had. As we walked out, she said, "See, that was fun. We should do this again sometime." I nodded, mostly out of fear that she'd cause a scene in the parking lot if I said no. The second I got in my car, I blocked her number. Then I sat there and just stared at my hands for like 5 minutes, wondering how a person could be so outwardly confident and still so completely out of touch with basic decency. This is gonna sound dumb, but the only reason I agreed to go out with Caleb in the first place is because he sent me a voice memo. Not a text, not a photo, a full-on voice memo. Like, who does that anymore? But I listened, and it was weirdly charming. He said something about how texting was too robotic and he liked hearing people's tone. He had this raspy kind of voice like he just woke up from a nap in a hoodie. So I gave him a chance. We matched on Bumble about a week before, and most of our messages were nothing special. He sent a lot of emojis. A lot. Like full sentences made of only emoji. But he seemed chill, and I'd been stuck in this cycle of dry conversations that never went past "what you doing?" So when he asked if I wanted to hang out Saturday, I said sure. I asked what he had in mind, and he hit me with, "I want to surprise you. But it's casual, just wear whatever you wear to like a friend's backyard." That sounded harmless enough, right? I assumed it was a chill park hang or something. Saturday comes, and I show up at the address he sends me. I Ubered because I figured if it was weird, I could dip without needing to wait on anyone. When we pull up, I'm confused immediately because we're in this neighborhood with rows of houses that all look copied and pasted. Like someone built a suburb from memory. I double-checked the address, and yeah, this is it. So I get out of the car and Caleb's already outside waiting. He runs up all excited, gives me a tight hug, and says, "Perfect timing, we just started the grill." I blinked. He grabs my hand and starts walking me toward the backyard, which is when I realize this isn't some chill hang. It's a full-on family cookout, like tables everywhere, folding chairs, uncles in jerseys holding red cups, kids running around with water balloons, a speaker blasting throwback R/B, and in the middle of it all, Caleb's mom waving at us from the grill with tongs in her hand. I literally stop walking and say, "Wait, this is your family thing?" He goes, "Yeah." I figured, why not skip the boring small talk and just jump into something fun? I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Before I could react, he pulls me into the crowd and starts introducing me to people. "This is my girl, Viel. Mom, this is the one I was telling you about. Uncle D, don't say anything crazy around her." I was just standing there frozen, holding a solo cup someone handed me, trying to piece together how I ended up at a damn family reunion on first date. I pulled him aside and asked why he didn't tell me this was a family event. He just laughed and said, "If I told you, you might have said no," and then smiled like that was clever. I wanted to leave right then, but I didn't want to make a scene. So I figured I'd stay for like 30 minutes, be polite, then come up with an excuse to leave. Should have known it wasn't gonna be that simple. The food was actually bomb, I won't lie. His aunt made some kind of sweet chili wings that were so good they almost made me forget how deeply uncomfortable I was. Almost. His little cousins kept asking if I was gonna marry Caleb and trying to show me TikToks. His grandma gave me a once-over and asked if I was saved. That uncle in the LeBron jersey offered me moonshine out of a plastic thermos. I was doing okay playing the cool stranger until this one girl showed up. Tall, curly hair, hoop earrings, looking like she meant business. I could feel the energy shift the second she walked through the side gate. A few people went quiet. One of the uncles muttered, "Oh Lord, here we go." That should have been my sign. She spots Caleb and immediately starts marching toward him like she had beef to settle. I'm standing next to him holding a plate of corn when she gets in his face and says, "You brought someone. Already?" Caleb goes stiff. Tries to laugh it off like it's no big deal. But she's not letting it go. She turns to me and says, "You must be the replacement. Did he tell you he was crying on my porch last week?" I blinked. Caleb quickly tries to steer her away, saying something like, "Can we not do this right now?" And she just explodes, right there, in the middle of the backyard, shouting about how he moved on like nothing happened, calling him a liar, demanding her hoodie back. People stopped eating. One of the kids dropped their juice pouch. The playlist cut out right as she yelled, "You emotionally constipated loser." I was frozen in place, still holding my corn like some background extra in a reality show. Caleb starts yelling back, telling her to leave, accusing her of showing up just to ruin things. She yells louder. His mom comes rushing over trying to calm them both down. The uncle with the red cup yells, "Not in front of the ribs, man." Eventually someone grabs her arm and starts walking her out. She keeps yelling over her shoulder the entire way. Caleb turns back to me, all out of breath, and says, "Sorry about that. She's dramatic." I didn't even respond. Just handed him the paper plate and told him I needed to use the bathroom. I walked inside, locked the door, and called my friend. Told her to call me in 5 minutes with a fake emergency. She didn't even ask questions, just said, "How bad?" And I said there was yelling and corn. I waited a few minutes, walked back outside, and pretended to answer the fake call. Told Caleb there was a situation with my neighbor's dog or something. He nodded, kind of distracted, and said we should hang out again sometime. I just said, "Yeah, maybe," and power walked to the front yard like my life depended on it. When the Uber pulled up, I didn't even look back. I got in, rolled the window down a crack, and just sat in silence the whole ride home while the driver played soft jazz. I've never been more grateful for jazz. All right, I already know this sounds bad, but I would usually go on dates with people who list Mama Bear in their bios. It's nothing personal. It's just, every time I have, the date ends up being less about getting to know each other and more like a job interview for free childcare. But Melissa's profile didn't mention anything about kids at all. Just said she worked in graphic design, loved sushi, and thought Shrek 2 was an underrated masterpiece. That last part was honestly what sold me. We matched on Hinge after I sent her a dumb voice note about Donkey being the true hero of the Shrek franchise, and she sent back this long laughing message agreeing with every word. We clicked fast, joked around a lot, same music taste. She had these chaotic playlists with names like Anxiety App, and songs that feel like accidentally spilling water on your sock. I figured, okay, this seems safe, funny, artsy, down to earth. Plus, she suggested meeting up, which I respect because I hate being the planner. She said she was craving Thai food and picked a place called Spice Room. Kind of low-key, nothing fancy. One of those restaurants where the menus are sticky but the food slaps. I showed up in a hoodie and jeans because I thought it was a chill vibe, and she'd said casual. Got there first, grabbed a booth by the window, and texted her where I was sitting. 2 minutes later, she walks in, and she's not alone. There's a kid with her. Like a full-on 5-year-old, holding her hand and dragging a plush T-Rex with one eye missing. I honestly thought maybe she was babysitting or something. But nope, she walks over, waves all happy, and says, "Hope you don't mind. I had some last-minute stuff with the sitter." Then sits down across from me like this was all totally normal. The kid climbs in next to her and immediately starts coloring on the paper menu with a crayon he brought from home. I'm just sitting there trying to process. Like, okay, this is clearly her kid. Cool. But maybe we reschedule. Maybe you text me and give me a heads up so I'm not ambushed with surprise parenting. She introduced him as Leo and said he was usually pretty chill. Which, spoiler alert, he was not. From the jump, he kept yelling out random facts about dinosaurs, throwing soy sauce packets on the floor, and asking me if I had boy hands or girl hands. Melissa just laughed and said he was in a phase. I tried to roll with it. I really did. I smiled, said hi to Leo, asked him if T-Rex was his favorite, made a few dumb dinosaur noises, even let him shove a fortune cookie in my face. Melissa ordered spring rolls and pads, see you for the table, then leaned over and said, "So what made you swipe right?" I wanted to say, definitely not the mystery child, but I kept it light. Said I liked her playlist names and she seemed fun. She smiled and said, "I can be, depending on the mood," which was probably supposed to sound flirty but just felt confusing in that moment while her kid was under the table making growling noises. We tried to talk between interruptions, but it was like trying to play Jenga on a boat. Every time we found a groove, Leo would either yell something or start kicking the booth or demand to know why I didn't know what a parasol office was. I answered like 4 trivia questions wrong before Melissa finally told him to stop quizzing me. She kept trying to act like this was a normal date, asking me about my job, what shows I was watching, if I liked kids. I kind of laughed awkwardly and said, I mean, they're cool in theory, and she gave me this weird look like I just insulted her cooking. Said, "You don't like kids?" I clarified that I didn't dislike them. I just didn't have much experience being around them, and I wasn't exactly in kid mode that day. Then she said, "Well, if we're gonna work, that's something you'll need to get comfortable with. Leo's a package deal." And I just blinked. Because what was there to even say to that? We hadn't even gotten our food yet. This was supposed to be a first date, not a parenting seminar. The food finally arrived, and Leo immediately started crying because his noodles were too curly. Melissa tried to swap plates with him, but he threw the chopsticks on the floor and yelled, "I want yours." She gave him her plate and then looked at me like she was expecting me to do something. I pushed my plate toward her and said, "You want some of mine?" She took a little, then sighed and said, "He usually warms up to people faster." As if this was my fault somehow. I sat there watching this kid eat with his hands while Melissa tried to pivot back into date conversation. But by that point, it was beyond saving. I was sweating. My leg was bouncing. The table was sticky. Leo dropped his dinosaur into the booth and started crying about how it was scared and alone. I got on my knees to get it, and the floor felt like it hadn't been mopped since 2009. When I gave it back to him, he looked at me and said, dead serious, "You smell like outside," then shoved the dinosaur in his mouth. Melissa laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd heard all week. I just sat back down and chugged my water. As soon as the bill came, I offered to split it just to get the whole thing over with, but Melissa waved me off and said, "No worries. This one's on me. Leo didn't vibe with you anyway." She said it in a joking voice, but I could tell she meant it. I was apparently failing some sort of test I didn't even know I was taking. We left the restaurant and she gave me this little half hug while Leo poked my leg and asked if I had any child snacks in my car. I said no, and Melissa rolled her eyes and said, "See, you can always tell." I got in my car and drove home in silence. no music, no podcasts, just thinking about how I showed up for a chill dinner and somehow ended up being rejected by a 5-year-old I didn't even know existed until an hour ago. This was one of those dates where, by the end of it, I wasn't even mad, just deeply, soul-level exhausted, like I aged 3 years in 90 minutes. The kind of night that makes you want to delete every app, throw your phone into the ocean, and just grow tomatoes alone forever. I met Derek through a group chat someone from work started. It was this young professionals in the city thing that was supposed to be networking, but mostly turned into people throwing memes and brunch photos back and forth until someone started flirting. Derek was one of the louder ones, always sending long messages at weird times, writing like he was narrating his own podcast. Not voice notes, actual essays. It was kind of funny at first, then kind of weird, and then I stopped reading them. He met me privately one night after I posted a screenshot of an absolutely unhinged dating app bio someone had sent me. He replied with, "See, this is why real connection is dead, and I shouldn't have," but I responded. We ended up going back and forth for a couple days. He was super wordy but decent enough. He asked if I wanted to get drinks. I said sure. I figured it couldn't be worse than the guy who tried to get me to go on a mystery date that turned out to be sitting in his car while he freestyled. We met up at this place called the Atrium. A little too trendy for my taste. Exposed brick, fake plants, a cocktail menu full of words like infusion and charred orange essence. I showed up in jeans and a thrifted jacket that may or may not have still smelled like the store. Derek was already at the bar. Button-down shirt, no jacket, sipping something that looked like a melted candle. He stood up. He gave me this very formal handshake, then said, "It's rare to find someone who knows how to communicate these days." I said, "Thanks," and he nodded like I'd passed some invisible test. I already knew I was in for a weird ride. We sat down and ordered drinks. I got a gin and soda because I wanted to keep it simple. He got something called a saffron twist highball, and then explained every single ingredient to me like I couldn't read the menu myself. 10 minutes in, he was already talking about modern dating failures and how it's all become transactional and emotionally bankrupt. I made a joke about people gossiping faster than DoorDash drivers, and he didn't laugh. Just sipped his drink and said, "Women waste their 20s chasing emotionally unavailable men, then expect emotional maturity from guys they ignored back then." I blinked. It came out of nowhere, like he'd been saving that line in his notes app for months just waiting to drop it on someone. I tried to play it off. I said something like, "That's a pretty big generalization." And he hit me with, "Tell me I'm wrong." I didn't respond. Because, what do you even say to that on a first date? He kept going. Said dating had become a consumer-based marketplace and that women optimize for excitement instead of stability. I asked him if he was writing a dissertation, and he smiled like I just complimented him. Then he started quizzing me, actually quizzing. Asked me how many relationships I've been in, what kind of guys I used to go for, and out of absolutely nowhere goes, "What's your body count?" Just like that. No lead up. No context. Just raw and abrupt like he was asking if I wanted fries. I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. He was dead serious. Said it was relevant information if we're talking about emotional compatibility. I told him I wasn't answering that. He said, "That's usually a red flag." I asked him how many people he'd been with. He shrugged and said, "Less than I could have, more than I should have," like that was some sort of clever riddle. He said he wasn't trying to judge. He just believed in radical-like transparency. Then launched into a speech about how hookup culture had damaged an entire generation's ability to pair bond. I told him he sounded like a Reddit thread. He didn't laugh. Again. After that, I mostly just focused on my drink and let him ramble. He told me about his last relationship, which apparently ended because she couldn't handle accountability. Said he had high standards and wasn't going to apologize for them. I nodded slowly while eyeing the exit. Every time I tried to shift the conversation to something lighter, like music or movies, he brought it right back to some lecture about emotional labor or how men are shamed for wanting traditional values. At one point, he told me he thinks women these days are too focused on independence to understand partnership. I almost spit my drink out. Then he started ranking traits. I'm not joking. He pulled out his phone, opened his notes app, and showed me a list titled "What I Value in a Wife." It had bullet points. He scrolled through it like it was his grocery list. Emotional intelligence, domestic awareness, low past partner count, family-oriented, fitness-minded, modest online presence. I wish I was making this up. I asked him if he'd ever consider therapy, and he said, I don't pay people to tell me what I already know. The waitress came by, and I practically begged her with my eyes to bring the check. When it came, he reached for it dramatically like he was proving a point, and said, I'm not one of those guys who expects you to split. I provide. I said thank you. He said, you're welcome, if you see me again. I left a separate tip in cash because I didn't trust him to not stiff the waitress for making him wait 5 minutes on his second drink. Outside the bar, he tried to walk me in my car. I said I was good. He said, let me know if you want to continue the conversation sometime. And I said I think I heard enough. I got in the car and just stared at my own face in the rearview mirror for a full minute. That mirror look where you're trying to make sense of your life choices without spiraling. That's how I ended up rage texting my group chat and deleting the whole damn group he came from. I'll be real with you. I didn't even want to be dating again. I was fresh out of a situationship that dragged on for way too long, and my brain was still fried from all the emotional ping pong. But my cousin made this dramatic speech about how I deserved to have fun again, then grabbed my phone and re-downloaded Hinge like she was doing me a huge favor. I let her because I was too mentally tired to argue, and I figured I'd swipe here and there, maybe flirt a little, get some validation, and not actually go out with anyone. Then I matched with Claire. She had this chaotic energy in her photos, posing on rooftops, mid-laugh with food in her mouth, hugging a giant Pikachu in one, holding a microphone in another like she was interviewing randoms on the street. Her bio said something like full-time content creator, part-time menace, and I should have taken that as a warning sign. But instead I was like, okay, maybe she's fun. We messaged for 2 days. She was fast with the comebacks, always cracking jokes, and I'll admit it was refreshing after the usual what are you doing small talk zombies. She asked if I wanted to grab coffee and walk around downtown on Saturday. Chill enough. Public setting. Low risk, I said yes. She picked a place. Some trendy little spot called Drip Theory that sells oat milk everything and has exactly one plug for the entire building. I got there right on time, wearing my standard first date fit. Black hoodie, clean sneakers, no expectations. Walked in, ordered a vanilla cold brew, and waited. Then Claire showed up. Phone in hand, arm outstretched, already live. I didn't even know what's happening at first. She walked in holding her phone like she was FaceTiming someone and said, hey guys, he's here. I thought she was just sending a video to a friend. Until she flipped the camera toward me and I saw my own confused face reflected on her screen. And then the comments started popping up. Literally popping up. Tiny little hearts floating across the screen. People commenting, ooh, he's kinda cute though. Mid, rate the fit y'all. I blinked so hard I thought my contacts might fall out. She pointed the camera at me again and said, this is no, I'll say I know. And I'm just standing there, gripping my cold brew, wondering if I'd accidentally signed up to be part of a reality show. I asked, quietly, are you live right now? And she goes, yeah, don't worry. My followers are super chill, they're used to this. Then kept talking to them like we were co-hosting a game show. I tried to laugh it off. Thought maybe she'd end the stream once we sat down. Nope. We grabbed a table near the window and she immediately propped her phone against the sugar jar like a makeshift tripod. People were still commenting nonstop. Some were asking where we met. Others were rating my voice. One person asked what I smelled like. She read that one out loud and sniffed the air around me like I was a scented candle. I wish I was joking. At first I tried to go with it, smiled awkwardly, sipped my drink, answered a few dumb questions she passed along from the chat. But it was impossible to actually talk to her. Every time I asked something about her job or family or literally anything, she'd glance at the screen and start talking to the chat instead. It felt like I was in a two-person interview where the audience kept cutting me off. The wildest part, she didn't even ask if I was cool with it. No. Hey, do you mind if I stream? Just, here's your new internet debut, enjoy. At one point, she slid the phone closer to my face and asked the chat to rate the jawline. I tried to lean back and she laughed like I was being dramatic. Said, they love you. You're good content. I think I blacked out a little when she said that. We were 20 minutes in when someone commented, he looks like he listens to sad music in the shower, and she'd read it out loud, dying laughing. I said, "That's weirdly specific." And she goes, "You totally do though, right?" And stuck the phone even closer to my face. I finally told her, "Hey, this is kinda uncomfortable. I wasn't expecting to be live." She blinked like I just told her I was allergic to air. Said, "Oh my God, don't be so sensitive. This is literally my job." I said I totally get that, but maybe next time just ask first. She rolled her eyes and said, "Darn it, I knew you were gonna be one of those guys." One of what guys? Apparently the kind who wants a little privacy on a first date. She turned off the live, finally, but not because she felt bad. Just said her engagement was dipping and she was losing the hype. After that, she barely looked at me. Just kept scrolling through her phone, checking her stats, sipping her overpriced matcha. I sat there in silence, watching some guy outside try to parallel park for 6 minutes, and honestly, he was the most entertaining part of the whole date. Before I could make up an excuse to leave, she said, "Well, this probably won't work long term. You don't really get the grind." I didn't argue. She stood up, grabbed her phone, and left with a quick, "Good luck, though. You got potential. Maybe not main character, but solid supporting energy." That was the end. I sat there for a minute, watching the oat milk foam melt into my drink, wondering if I'd just been soft launched on someone's feed. I checked TikTok later that night, and sure enough, there I was. Hashtag first date vibes. The comments were a mix of "he's cute but nervous" and "why does he blink like that?" I didn't even bother reporting the video, just turned my phone off and stared at the ceiling until I fell asleep. Okay, so I didn't even think it was a date at first. I met Ryan through a mutual connection at work, and when he invited me to dinner, he worded it so vaguely that I thought it was just like a casual thing. Networking, maybe. Or just two people grabbing food and talking about creative projects. He said something like, "We should catch up sometime. I know a great Italian place," which sounded chill and honestly harmless. I was new to the city, and meeting people outside of my office or my landlord's cats was something I was trying to be better about. So I said yes, why not? I'd been spending most of my evenings reheating leftovers and watching videos of dogs getting surprised by cucumbers. I figured going out wouldn't kill me. I got there a little early because the restaurant he picked, some place called Bolemio, was in a part of town I wasn't familiar with. The inside was super romantic. Low lighting, tiny tables, piano music playing way too softly in the background. It had the energy of a place people go to break up gently or get proposed to by someone they're not totally sure about. I texted him when I got there, and he came in a few minutes later wearing a full button-up tucked into jeans. Not like business casual, like aggressively tucked. Like he was going to court but still wanted to look approachable. He gave me a weird half-hug, didn't say much, just pointed to a table like this was a mission briefing. We sat down and ordered drinks. He got a whiskey. I got a red wine because it felt like the only option in a place like that. I remember thinking maybe I should dress nicer because I'd shown up in a denim jacket and Vans, but whatever. I'm not trying to marry the guy, I'm just here for pasta. Right away, he starts talking. Not in the usual date way, not asking how my week was or what I'd do for fun. Just jumps straight into this rant about his ex-wife. No transition, no warning. I hadn't even opened the menu yet. She was always like this, he says. Always tearing me down, always making everything about her. I looked up from the drink list like, wait, what? He keeps going. Tells me how she was selfish, manipulative, spent all his money, poisoned his friendships, didn't support his career, made him feel like a ghost in his own house. Says all this while swirling his whiskey like he's in some courtroom drama. I tried to laugh it off, said something dumb like, "Sounds like it ended on a high note," hoping he'd pick up the sarcasm and change the subject. He didn't. He went deeper. Told me about how she cheated on him, multiple times apparently, and how he caught her by going through her tablet. Told me about the guy she cheated with, some coworker named Brent who couldn't even grow a real beard. Told me about the therapy sessions that turned into arguments, how she refused to go to his mom's birthday party, how she hated his dog. I just kept sipping my wine and nodding like I was his divorce lawyer. I wasn't even sure if I should interrupt. The waiter came by to take our order, and Ryan didn't even stop mid-sentence. He just waved his hand and said, "We'll take the house lasagna," and then kept talking. Didn't ask me what I wanted. Didn't even look at the menu. Just ordered for both of us like we'd been married ourselves for 10 years. Eventually, I was like, hey, so what do you do for work again? Just trying to steer the car off the highway. He said he was in real estate, then somehow tied that back to how his ex tried to get the house in the divorce. It was like every road led back to her. The weirdest part was that he didn't seem sad. He wasn't venting. It wasn't emotional. It was like he was trying to win, like he was building a case, stacking evidence. Every sentence was designed to make her look worse. And I just sat there chewing dry bread, waiting for the part where we talked about literally anything else. Then it got worse. About halfway through the meal, after another 10 minutes of ex-wife greatest hits, he leans back and says, honestly, I'm just glad she'd probably losing her mind seeing me here with someone younger and nice. And I swear to you, I froze. Fork halfway in my mouth, staring at him like he'd just told me he was secretly 3 raccoons in a trench coat. I asked, wait, is that why we're here? He didn't even try to lie. He just shrugged and said, look, I figured it wouldn't hurt. She checks my stories sometimes. I figured if she saw me out with someone, she'd know I'm doing just fine without her. That's when it clicked. The overly romantic setting, the uncomfortably forced wine order, the reason he asked if we could take a quick photo before we sat down. He was trying to make his ex jealous, and I was the prop. I said, so this is like a revenge date. And he smiled and said, don't take it personally. You're still great company. I couldn't even process it. Like, how do you respond to someone telling you flat out that your entire presence is a chess move in their emotional pettiness? I didn't finish my lasagna. I barely touched it. Just sat there in disbelief while he kept rambling about how she always hated when I went out without her, so this will really burn. I told him I had to leave, and he asked if I was mad or just sensitive. That was the last straw. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and walked out. No dramatic exit, no big speech. Just done. He texted me the next day with a thumbs up emoji and said, she watched my story lol. I didn't reply. That night I've ordered takeout, sat on my floor with a woolly blanket, and watched 3 straight episodes of cooking videos where nobody spoke. Just quiet chopping and sizzling and zero chaos. It was the best date I'd had in months. Would recommend. So my buddy from college is mostly terrible at setting people up, but this one time I was bored and said yes just to shut him up. He'd been hyping up Jenna like she was some kind of rare gem. Told me she was confident, funny, not like other girls, which should have been my clue right there. That's straight up pick me vibes. But I was like, cool, maybe this'll be different. At worst, I figured I'd get a decent meal and a weird story out of it. My expectations were already low. We agreed to meet at this burger place called Marty's that had just reopened after remodeling. Nothing fancy, but it's got good food, those boots that make you sink down 2 inches too far, and a shake menu that slaps way harder than it should. I got there first, grabbed a booth near the window, and started checking the menu even though I always get the same thing. She showed up like 10 minutes later wearing business casual like she just left a corporate interview, but still wanted to look cool. White blazer, tight pants, serious expression. She didn't smile at first, just sat down, opened the menu, and said, I had to park in a nightmare. Is this place always this chaotic? I told her I didn't know, but I liked the food. She said she hoped the service was decent. I was like, all right, mood set. Let's see where this goes. A few minutes later, the waitress came over to take our drink orders. Nice girl, maybe our age, ponytail, friendly voice. Jenna didn't even look at her. Didn't say hi. Just tilted her head slightly and looked at me instead, like I was supposed to speak for both of us. I ordered my drink and waited. Jenna kept staring at her water glass like it had betrayed her. The waitress finally asked, and for you. And Jenna looked up, finally, and said, is there a male server available? Just like that. No explanation. No tone. Just ice-cold delivery like she was asking for extra napkins. The waitress kind of laughed at first like maybe she matured, but Jenna didn't crack a smile. The girl went quiet, nodded weirdly, and said she'd go check. I sat there with my eyebrows somewhere near my hairline, just stunned. I asked Jenna if something happened, like maybe she knew the waitress or had a bad history with the place. She just waved her hand and said, I don't do female service. It always ends in attitude. I blinked, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. She kept going, said she's had too many experiences with female servers being rude, jealous, or just plain slow. Then dropped this gem. I don't trust women in the workplace. It's just drama waiting to happen. I actually leaned back like someone had hit me. I said, "That's kind of a wild thing to say." She shrugged and said, "It's just facts. Men are more efficient. Women let emotions get in the way." Then sipped her water like she just solved climate change. I was already halfway out mentally, but I stayed because I didn't want to cause a scene in the middle of Marty's. Plus, part of me was just fascinated at how someone could say that with their full chest and still seem unbothered. Eventually, the guy's server came over, clearly confused, asking if everything was okay. Jenna lit up like Christmas morning. Said, "Much better. Thank you. I just prefer things handled a certain way." She smiled at him for the first time all night. The poor guy looked like he wanted to be anywhere else but here. I ordered a burger. Jenna asked like 3 unnecessary questions about the menu, then told the guy her order and added, "You're already doing a great job." I could feel the secondhand cringe radiating through the table. Once he walked off, I tried to bring the mood back. Asked about her job, what she liked to do outside of work. She said she was in recruiting and that her biggest pet peeve was when women gossip too much in meetings. I asked if she had mostly female coworkers, and she said no, because I don't play into sisterhood culture. Then told me she prefers working in male-dominated offices because she's goal-oriented, not emotional. Everything she said came with this weird smug energy, like she thought she was dropping hard truths. I wanted to ask if she was okay or just chronically mean. When the food came, the guy server placed it down gently and said he'd check back in a minute. Jenna gave him this over-the-top thank you like he just saved her life. I tried to joke saying, "Should we tip an extra for being male?" And she just said, "Actually, yes." I nearly choked on my fry. She went on this mini rant about how she always tips male servers better because they actually try. Said it's not discrimination, just standards, like she was doing some kind of justice. I couldn't believe I was sitting there while this woman casually built her own internal misogyny pyramid with fries on the side. I barely ate. The burger was good, but the whole vibe was sour. I asked one more time, mostly out of curiosity, if she really thought all women in service jobs were bad. She said, "Not all, just most. It's a pattern. You'll notice it more if you actually pay attention." I paid attention, all right. I was paying attention to how fast I could finish my soda and dip. When the check came, she told the male server he was one of the good ones, then turned to me and said, "See, isn't it better when men are in charge?" I stared at the receipt and mentally punched myself for agreeing to this in the first place. We split the bill. She said, "I'd love to do this again sometime. Maybe somewhere with valet so I don't have to park next to peasants." And I fake laughed while already planning my coast strategy. She gave me a side hug at the door and walked off like nothing weird had happened. I got in my car, sat for a second, then voice noted my friend. "Okay, so remind me to never let you suggest dates again unless you want me to join a cult." Look, I've never been anti-green plant. I'm not one of those people who flips out because someone lights up a joint. Okay, it's legal here, it's not a big deal. Some of my favorite people smoke, and sometimes I even steal a gummy when I'm too wired to sleep. So I don't want this to sound like one of those stories where the entire problem is just he was high. The problem with Eddie wasn't that he smoked that stuff. The problem with Eddie was that he was Eddie. We matched on a Thursday, and he asked me out by Friday. Move fast. His bio said he liked hiking, stand-up comedy, and deep convos with shallow people, which made me laugh for like 2 seconds until I realized he probably meant it. He had this blurry profile pic where you couldn't tell if he was at a concert or in a garage, but his messages were funny, and honestly, I'd had such a trash week that I needed something low effort to look forward to. He suggested a diner just outside the city, said they had the best grilled cheese of all time and pies that could solve emotional trauma. I said sure. It sounded kind of chaotic and comforting. I love a weird diner. He told me to meet him in the parking lot around 7 and said, "You'll know my car when you see it, lol." That should have been my first red flag. People who say that are never driving normal cars. So I pull in, and the first thing I see is this beat-up black car parked at an angle across 2 spaces. It's got one missing hubcap, a dent in the passenger door, and this giant anime decal stretched across the rear window. I'm not even making that up. It said D8th is the real adventure in bold white letters. That was Eddie's car. He gets out as I'm pulling up. Hoodie, joggers, slides with socks, and very obvious puff of smoke trailing him. I roll my window down and the smell hits me like a punch. It's not subtle. It's not even just that herb. It's strong, like he just got out of a hotbox spaceship. He walks up to my window grinning and says, "Yo, I pre-gamed a little." That laughs at himself like he's the cleverest man alive. I laugh politely and ask, "You drove like this?" And he goes, "Chill. The cops never care if you're chill." I just stared at him. I didn't even know how to respond to that logic. Like, what does that even mean? Is there a secret code now? You can drive faded as long as you give the cop a peace sign and a good vibe. I considered leaving right then. I really did. But I was already there. The place was 10 steps away, and I hadn't eaten since lunch. So I made the brilliant choice of going inside with him anyway. He held the door open with one hand and kept adjusting his hoodie with the other like he couldn't decide if he was hot or cold. We grabbed a booth by the window. I ordered a chocolate milkshake because I needed something to comfort me through the weirdness, and he ordered waffles and onion rings, which honestly wouldn't have been weird if he didn't ask the server 3 times if the syrup was ethically sourced. I watched her blink in slow motion trying to figure out if he was serious. The thing about talking to Eddie is that you never know where the conversation's going because he doesn't either. He told me about how he used to sell sneakers out of his trunk in high school, then jumped to a rant about how society forces turtles to compete with hares, and no one questions that. I don't know if that was a metaphor or a joke or some kind of Mary J.J.-induced TED Talk, but I just nodded along because every time I tried to say something normal, like asking what he did for work, he'd go, "Work is a scam. I make my own money." I asked what that meant, and he said, "I flip stuff." I asked what kind of stuff, and he said, "Like vibes. And sometimes PlayStations." I gave up after that. Then he started getting philosophical. Said most people were addicted to thinking, and that he was trying to live slower. I asked if that just meant being high all the time, and he laughed so hard he slapped the table and knocked over the ketchup. He called me real for saying that and told me I had main character sarcasm. Whatever that means. Every few minutes, he'd randomly stare off into the distance like he was seeing something I couldn't. Then he'd lean back and whisper something like, "Do you ever think the moon is watching us?" I told him I thought the diner security camera probably was, and he nodded like I'd said something profound. The food came and he immediately drowned everything in hot sauce. Like, everything. The waffles, the onion rings, even a little on the side of his milkshake. Then he dipped an onion ring in the milkshake, took a bite, and made this face like he'd just unlocked a new flavor dimension. He offered me a bite and I said I was good. He told me I was missing out on flavor evolution. Halfway through dinner, he pulled out a vape the size of a TV remote and asked if I'd ever tried Sky Melon. I said no, and he told me I didn't really live yet. I told him I was doing fine without vaping something named after a hypothetical fruit. He said that was a shame. The bill came and he stared at it like it had insulted his ancestors. He pulled out a crumpled wad of cash, counted out exact change like we were in a sketchy movie, then told the server keep the vibes instead of leaving an actual tip. I threw down a $5 bill just to undo his spiritual damage. As we walked out, he'd asked if I wanted to go sit in his car and listen to some real music. I said I had to be up early. He nodded solemnly and said early mornings are a trap. Time is fake. Then gave me this hug that lasted a full 10 seconds longer than necessary. I got in my car and watched him climb into his, crank the music to what had to be full blast, and then just sit there, nodding with his eyes closed. I drove off wondering if I'd just been on a date or a social experiment. The only reason I agreed to go out with Lily was because I was trying to prove something to myself. Not even something deep. Just that I could say yes without overthinking it. I'd been in this stupid rut where I'd talk to someone for 3 days, get bored or overanalyze their bio to death, and then ghost like it was a civic duty. I told myself, no more excuses. Just go out, eat something good, meet someone weird, and move on. Her profile wasn't even that special. It was one of those half-serious, half-bit ones with lines like, "Don't make me your manic pixie dream girl unless you pay health insurance." I figured she was probably the type to tweet things like men should come with patch notes and wear Doc Martens in the summer, which sounded tolerable. We matched on the Sunday. She messaged first and said, "I like your face. Want to get noodles or trauma bonded over a mediocre cocktail?" I picked noodles. She picked the place. some tiny ramen shop with maybe 9 seats and a chopboard menu that changes depending on the cook's mood. She said it was quirky in the right way, which turned out to mean the chairs wobbled and you had to ask for napkins like they were contraband. I got there early, sat at a 2-person table wedged into a corner, and looked through the menu even though it was like 4 items total. She walked in 5 minutes later wearing a plaid skirt, an oversized hoodie with a random band logo I didn't recognize, and headphones still around her neck like she'd just stepped out of a moody indie film. She sat down, pulled the hood off, and said, "I'm starving. Also, don't fall in love with me." I thought she was joking, so I laughed. She didn't. We ordered quickly. She got spicy miso. I got tonkatsu. No drinks. She said she was on a cleanse that only allowed fermented things and oat milk. I didn't feel like drinking alone. First 20 minutes were chill, honestly. She asked about my most irrational fear. I said horses, because they're too smart and too quiet. And she told me hers was accidentally joining a cult. She said she came close once because the people had really good graphic design and gave out free smoothies. I laughed. She smiled, and I thought, okay, maybe this will be one of those weirdly good dates you remember later when you're bored and scrolling through old photos. Then she said, "You're definitely episode 6. I blinked. I asked, episode 6 of what? Even though my stomach already had that little drop you get right before a car crash. She grinned and said, "My podcast. It's about modern dating. I go on a date every week, and then I break it down with my co-host. The good, the bad, the awkward. Yours has got to be called the vanilla one." She said it so casually, like she was telling me she does yoga on Tuesdays. Just, yeah, I record people's behavior and broadcast it. No big deal. I sat there stunned, not even angry yet, just confused. I asked, "Wait, are you recording me?" And she rolled her eyes like I was the weird one. Said, "No, that would be illegal. It's all from memory. We don't use names or anything." I asked if she at least tells people beforehand. She shrugged and said, "Only if they seem insecure. You seemed chill." The mental gymnastics it took to not flip the table right then and there. I deserve a medal. I asked if all her dates were for the podcast, and she said, "Well, yeah, I mean, it's research. Plus, no one actually dates for real anymore. Might as well get content out of it." I didn't even know how to respond to that. I just kind of stared at my soup while she explained how episode 3 was about a guy who cried when his dog came up in conversation, and episode 4 was this dude who ghosted mid-date and later texted her, "My bad, my brain glitched." She was laughing while telling me all this, sipping her broth like she wasn't casually dismantling people's dignity for clout. She pulled out her phone and showed me the podcast homepage on Spotify. The cover was a cartoon of 2 girls sitting at a bar surrounded by little speech bubbles like "red flag" and "no vibes." There were reviews. Real listeners. Some saying it was hilarious and raw, and finally, dating pain turned into art. I felt like I was in a simulation. Then she said, "Don't worry, I'll go easy on you. You're not that messy. Just kind of standard." She gave me this look like I should be flattered, like being labeled standard was a compliment now. I finally asked, "What exactly are you going to say about me?" And she tilted her head, thinking. Said, "Probably something about your energy. You are the vibe guy who knows how to fix a bike, but only if it's your own. Maybe something about your safe taste in food. I don't know yet. Depends how the rest of this goes." I sat there, spoon halfway to my mouth, just watching her talk like I wasn't even part of the equation anymore. Like I'd been turned into a case study mid-sip. After that, I was done. I didn't flip out or argue or get petty. I just sat through the rest of the meal quietly, eating my soup, nodding occasionally. She didn't even notice. She was too busy taking mental notes for her next episode. When the check came, I paid. She said, "Thanks. I'll shove you behind the credits." And I think she meant it as a joke. I just smiled. We walked out, and she waved at me like we'd just finished a coffee meeting. I got in my car and stared at my hands on the wheel, wondering how many people I casually dismissed that could have just been someone's weird version of episode content. She texted me the next day and said, "You were surprisingly sweet. Might even bump you to episode 5. Stay tuned." I didn't respond, but yeah, I tuned in. And yep, I was episode 6. I met Nick through this overly enthusiastic book club I joined during a weird try new things phase. It was mostly an excuse to get out of the house once a week and feel like I was being productive while barely reading 2 chapters. The group was a mix of English majors, aspiring writers, and people who just liked drinking wine while pretending to discuss themes. Nick was one of the regulars. He always had a lot to say, like hell a lot. He was one of those people who try to be funny by sounding annoyed with everything. Kind of charming in the right context, especially when he was ranting about how nobody truly finishes Ulysses, and people only pretend to like Kerouac. He had this smug, sarcastic vibe that was entertaining in a group setting, but I wasn't sure how that would translate one-on-one. Still, when he asked if I wanted to grab dinner sometime, I figured why not. He didn't seem like a serial killer, and at the very least I thought we'd have something interesting to talk about. He suggested a Turkish place downtown that I'd never been to. I was actually excited to try it. I hadn't been on a proper sit-down date in a while, and I figured maybe his hypercritical vibe would mellow out over food. I got there first and texted him where I was sitting. He came in 5 minutes later wearing a wrinkled gray button-up and what looked like running shoes. He gave me this short nod and said, "Hope you're ready to witness humanity's downfall in menu form." I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Apparently, the restaurant had too many fusion dishes, which he claimed was a sign of culinary surrender. We ordered. I went with something basic, chicken kebab and rice. He ordered 2 appetizers and no main, said he doesn't believe in entrees unless they're earned. I didn't ask what that meant. At first, the conversation was all right, mostly book stuff. I told him I finally started reading one of the club picks instead of bluffing my way through, and he made a sarcastic toast with his water glass like I just graduated. It was playful, borderline condescending, but not totally unpleasant. I was trying to stay open-minded. Then, right as the waiter dropped off the hummus, everything took a sharp turn into unhinged territory. He pulled his phone out, tapped around for a second, then flipped it around and placed it on the table screen facing me. "Check this out," he said. It was a PowerPoint, like an actual presentation. Full screen mode and everything. I thought maybe he was showing me a meme or a funny story or something. Nope. First slide said, "Ghost Files, the act of disappearing women." I laughed again. Nervous habit. Asked, "What is this?" He said, "These are girls who ghosted me over the last year. I've been compiling screenshots. I want a second opinion." Before I could process, he tapped the screen and went to slide 2. There was a screenshot of a text thread between him and someone named Harissa. Blue and gray bubbles. She stopped responding after a joke he made about astrology being diet religion. He turned to me and said, "Now, would you say that ghosting was valid or unprovoked?" I said, "You made fun of her beliefs, so..." And he cut me off. Exactly, it was a joke. People have no sense of humor anymore. Slide 3. Samantha. She unmatched him after he sent a 6-paragraph monologue about how coffee dates are capitalist distractions from real intimacy. He read part of it out loud. I could feel myself physically shrinking into my chair. Then came slides 4, 5, 6, all screenshots. Some were short combos that ended in silence. Others were full threads where the girl would slowly disengage over time. A few were just Tinder messages that never got responses, which honestly doesn't even count. That's just the app doing what the app does. After each slide, he'd look at me for feedback, like I was a judge on some twisted game show. Now this one, Chelsea. Do you think I came on too strong? Look at this part. Do you think she misunderstood my tone? Do I come off aggressive here or just passionate? I tried being diplomatic at first. Said stuff like, maybe she wasn't feeling it, or it's hard to read tone over text. But he wasn't having it. Every time I gave a neutral answer, he challenged it like we were debating policy. At some point I just asked, "Why are you showing me this?" And he said, "Honestly, I want to understand the pattern." You're a woman. I figured you could help me decode the behavior. Plus, I thought it'd be interesting. I stared at him, fork in hand, hummus halfway to my mouth, and just blinked. I told him, "This is a first date." He nodded like he already knew. Said, "Exactly. So you haven't formed bias yet. You're objective." I put my fork down. He kept going. 10 slides in. By now he was talking about data collection and how he thinks dating is basically social science. I asked if the girls knew they were in his presentation. He said, "Of course not. That would skew the results. I asked, do you ever wonder if the reason they stopped talking to you is this energy? And he laughed like that was a wild theory. Then, like it was nothing, he said, so far, you're already outperforming 4 of the ones I dated. You made it to dinner. I don't know if he meant that as a compliment or a flex or both. I just sat there, trying to decide if I should finish my meal out of spite or just leave and eat cereal at home. He tapped to the last slide. It just said, to be continued. I said I wasn't feeling great and needed to head out early. He offered to walk me to my car, but I said I'd rather not get psychoanalyzed on the sidewalk. He nodded and said, fair. As I stood up, he asked, would it be okay if I quoted you on the podcast version of this? I didn't even reply, just walked out. 10 minutes later, I got a text that said, thanks for being chill. You were episode 13. Lucky number. I hadn't been on a proper date in like 8 months. I wasn't swearing off love or anything, but dating just felt like trying to find a decent song on the radio. Mostly static, and the good ones are already taken or hard to hear. But then I started chatting with Hannah on a dating app that people use when they're somewhere between giving up and hoping for a miracle. She had a bunch of pictures hiking and doing yoga. Her profile said she was into clean living and clean energy, and she had one of those glowy wellness influencer smiles that kind of hypnotizes you into thinking she's chill. We talked for a few days. She asked a lot of questions, which I appreciated. Most people just talk about themselves until your phone dies, but she actually seemed curious. She asked about my job, my cat, who she called wholesome just from a photo, and what my ideal weekend looked like. I said something about farmers markets and documentaries, and she replied, you're giving non-toxic masculinity, I'm here for it. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but it sounded like a green light. So I asked her to dinner. I offered to make the reservation, and she said, surprise me. I picked this new Mediterranean spot a few blocks from my apartment. I'd been once before, and the food was incredible. Like, I still thought about their lamb skewers months later. It was casual but nice, not too loud. Had outdoor seating, and yeah, a pride flag sticker on the front door. It was a small thing right by the hours of operation sign, not even flashy. I'd seen it before and thought nothing of it, but it became a very big deal very fast. The plan was to meet outside. I got there first, leaned against the wall scrolling on my phone. I saw her walking up from half a block away. Long coat, hair tied up, big scarf like she was hiding from the wind and the world. She smiled as she got close, and then suddenly stopped. Just froze in front of the restaurant and stared at the window. I thought maybe she saw someone she knew or stepped in something weird, so I asked, you good? And she didn't even look at me. She just pointed at the pride flag sticker with her perfectly manicured finger and said, is this a joke? I blinked. I asked what she meant. She turned to me, arms crossed now, and said, did you seriously pick a place with that in the window? Were you trying to see how I'd react or something? I was confused, like genuinely confused. I said, no, I just like their food. What's the problem? And she goes, that's not just a flag, that's an agenda. You knew that'd make me uncomfortable, and you brought me here on purpose. Now I'm standing on the sidewalk trying to figure out if this is a prank. Like, is Ashton Kutcher still out here doing hidden camera shows? Because there's no way this girl, who literally texted me about chakras and soul alignments, is having a meltdown over a tiny rainbow sticker. I tried to calm things down. I said, it's just a restaurant. It's not political. I didn't choose it to make a statement. She replied, everything's political. You think I want to eat food from people who push this kind of thing? You think I want to give my money to a place that doesn't share my values? At this point, I was starting to sweat. Not because I was nervous, but because I was furious. I told her, as calmly as I could, if a pride flag makes you this upset, I don't think we're aligned on anything. She shook her head like I was the one being dramatic. She said, you seem like a decent guy, but this feels like a test. Like you're trying to catch me saying the wrong thing so you can feel morally superior. I was stunned. A test? I just wanted falafel. She kept going. Said she'd had too many experiences where guys tried to shame her beliefs just because she didn't go along with every woke trend. Said she wasn't hateful, she just questioned narratives. Said it was brave to speak your truth in a world that demonizes tradition. I didn't even know where to start with all that. I wanted to say 100 things, but I also didn't want to waste any more breath. I told her I wasn't interested in spending a night defending basic decency. She rolled her eyes, said, "Of course not," and turned around and walked away without saying bye. I stood there for a second, completely still, like my brain had blue screened. Then I went inside and asked for a table for one. Ate my lamb skewers in silence. Thought about how we'd gone from joking about weekend plans to arguing on the sidewalk over a flag smaller than a sticker on a banana. When I got home, I deleted her number in the app. Not in a dramatic, I'm done with dating way. Just like, I needed a reset. You think you've seen red flags, and then someone gets mad about a rainbow. This date came out of nowhere. I wasn't looking. I deleted all the dating apps a month earlier because I kept matching with guys who either had podcast microphones in their bios or said things like, "I don't believe in labels," but somehow always expected full commitment. I was burned out. I was fully ready to just focus on sleep, skincare, and avoiding eye contact at the grocery store. But then I met Zod at this little used bookstore near my place. I was minding my business, flipping through a cookbook I had no intention of buying, when this guy walked past me holding, I swear to God, a stack of 5 books. 4 about economic collapse and 1 about mushrooms. He made some comment about how no one reads the truth anymore, and I chuckled because I thought he was being ironic. Spoiler, he was not. He had this whole disheveled thing going, cargo jacket, boots that looked like he'd hiked to the store from a mountaintop, hair that gave I haven't brushed it, but it's on purpose. I was caught off guard because he was actually kind of cute in that wild-eyed, intense way some people pull off without trying. We talked for like 10 minutes about books and documentaries and how we both hated grocery store music. He asked if I wanted to grab tea sometime, and I figured why not. He seemed interesting. I was craving something that didn't feel like a scripted app interaction. We went out by this tiny cafe that looked like it used to be a laundromat. There were plants and teapots and some kind of crystal grid on one of the tables. It smelled like cardamom and wood smoke. Zod was already there when I arrived, sitting in the corner scrolling on his phone like he was researching something urgent. He stood up when I walked in, gave me a half hug, then launched straight into telling me about how he hadn't slept much the night before because he went down a deep rabbit hole. I laughed thinking he meant YouTube or some weird subreddit. I should have known. We ordered drinks. He had some herbal thing with ginger and cloves that the barista brewed like it was a potion. I got a chai latte and sat down expecting to talk about books or music. Instead, Zod immediately pulled out his phone, tapped around, and said, "Okay, I want to show you something." I thought it would be a meme or a trailer or maybe a video of a dog on a skateboard. But no, he turned the screen toward me and started playing this grainy video of a guy talking about water fluoridation and how it alters your perception of obedience. I blinked. He was already nodding along. I watched for a few seconds, trying to keep a neutral face, then said, "Oh, wild," and went to sip my drink, hoping we could pivot to literally anything else. But Zod wasn't done. He had a whole queue of videos lined up. He said, "This next one is about power grids and food control. You gotta see this." Before I could say anything, the next video was already playing. This one had dramatic music and maps, and some guy narrating like it was a trailer for a thriller movie. I glanced around to see if anyone else in the cafe was noticing. No one was, just me and a guy who came prepared for the end times. Every time I tried to shift the topic, ask about his favorite authors, what kind of stuff he grew up reading, if he had any siblings, he'd find a way to loop it back to the system. He said school was brainwashing. He said Wi-Fi made people sick. He said the real economy isn't money, it's control. I said, "That's a lot." And he said, "Not enough, honestly." 45 minutes in, I was holding my lukewarm chai with both hands like it was a lifeline. He kept showing me charts on his phone, articles that looked like they were made in word art, and clips from interviews with men who had never blinked once in their lives. I didn't know how to tell him I didn't want to watch another documentary unless it had a chef or an animal rescue involved. Then he dropped a big one, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "So, like, if things went down, would you be open to living off-grid?" I actually laughed, thought he was joking. He wasn't. He said he was slowly gathering tools. Said he'd been practicing water filtration and learning how to grow mushrooms indoors. Said he wanted to build a cabin one day and live off solar panels and dried lentils. Then he looked at me and said, "You seem like someone who could handle that kind of life. Like, I can see you thriving outside the noise." I didn't know how to respond to that. I wasn't trying to live in a moss-covered shack learning to make fire from rocks. I like hot showers in Google Maps and eating food I didn't have to store in vacuum-sealed buckets. I tried to gently change the topic again. Said something about how I like the idea of disconnecting, but probably not in the literal middle of nowhere. He just nodded slowly and said, "Most people are scared of freedom at first. It's the conditioning." I excused myself to go to the bathroom and spent 5 full minutes standing in front of the sink wondering if I could fake an emergency and dip. But I didn't. I went back to the table and sat through another 20 minutes of his plan to escape the urban collapse, which included dehydrating fruit and buying a goat. When the check came, he didn't even look at it. Just said, "I don't really do money anymore. It's a concept I'm letting go of, so I paid for both of us." Outside, he gave me a fist bump and said, "You have a calm aura. Text me if you ever want to learn how to purify rainwater." I said, "Sure," and walked to my car with the energy of someone who just left a cult recruitment seminar. Locked his number before I even hit the freeway. I hadn't been on a proper date in like 8 months. I wasn't swearing off love or anything, but dating just felt like trying to find a decent song on the radio. Mostly static, and the good ones are already taken or hard to hear. But then I started chatting with Hannah on a dating app that people use when they're somewhere between giving up and hoping for a miracle. She had a bunch of pictures hiking and doing yoga. Her profile said she was into clean living and clean energy, and she had one of those glowy wellness influencer smiles that kind of hypnotizes you into thinking she's chill. We talked for a few days. She asked a lot of questions, which I appreciated. Most people just talk about themselves until your phone dies, but she actually seemed curious. She asked about my job, my cat, who she called wholesome just from a photo, and what my ideal weekend looked like. I said something about farmers markets and documentaries, and she replied, "You're giving non-toxic masculinity. I'm here for it." I didn't know what that meant exactly, but it sounded like a green light. So I asked her to dinner. I offered to make the reservation, and she said, "Surprise me." I picked this new Mediterranean spot a few blocks from my apartment. I'd been once before, and the food was incredible. Like, I still thought about their lamb skewers months later. It was casual but nice, not too loud. Had outdoor seating, and yeah, a pride flag sticker on the front door. It was a small thing right by the hours of operation sign, not even flashy. I'd seen it before and thought nothing of it, but it became a very big deal very fast. The plan was to meet outside. I got there first, leaned against the wall scrolling on my phone. I saw her walking up from half a block away. Long coat, hair tied up, big scarf like she was hiding from the wind and the world. She smiled as she got close, and then suddenly stopped. Just froze in front of the restaurant and stared at the window. I thought maybe she saw someone she knew or stepped in something weird, so I asked, "You good?" And she didn't even look at me. She just pointed at the pride flag sticker with her perfectly manicured finger and said, "Is this a joke?" I blinked. I asked what she meant. She turned to me, arms crossed now, and said, "Did you seriously pick a place with that in the window? Were you trying to see how I'd react or something?" I was confused, like genuinely confused. I said, "No, I just like their food. What's the problem?" And she goes, "That's not just a flag, that's an agenda. You knew that'd make me uncomfortable, and you brought me here on purpose." Now I'm standing on the sidewalk trying to figure out if this is a prank. Like, is Ashton Kutcher still out here doing hidden camera shows? Because there's no way this girl, who literally texted me about chakras and soul alignments, is having a meltdown over a tiny rainbow sticker. I tried to calm things down. I said, "It's just a restaurant. It's not political. I didn't choose it to make a statement." She replied, "Everything's political. You think I want to eat food from people who push this kind of thing. You think I want to give my money to a place that doesn't share my values." At this point, I was starting to sweat. Not because I was nervous, but because I was furious. I told her as calmly as I could, "If a pride flag makes you this upset, I don't think we're aligned on anything." She shook her head like I was the one being dramatic. She said, "You seem like a decent guy, but this feels like a test. Like you're trying to catch me saying the wrong thing so you can feel morally superior." I was stunned. A test? I just wanted falafel. She kept going. Said she'd had too many experiences where guys tried to shame her beliefs just because she didn't go along with every woke trend. Said she wasn't hateful, she just questioned narratives. Said it was brave to speak your truth in a world that demonizes tradition. I didn't even know where to start with all that. I wanted to say 100 things, but I also didn't want to waste any more breath. I told her I wasn't interested in spending a night defending basic decency. She rolled her eyes, said, "Of course not," and turned around and walked away without saying bye. I stood there for a second, completely still, like my brain had blue screened. Then I went inside and asked for a table for one. Ate my lamb skewers in silence. Thought about how we'd gone from joking about weekend plans to arguing on the sidewalk over a flag smaller than a sticker on a banana. When I got home, I deleted her number in the app. Not in a dramatic "I'm done with dating" way. Just like I needed a reset. You think you've seen red flags, and then someone gets mad about a rainbow. Cool, so basically, I met Katie through a mutual friend who claimed she was opinionated but very fun, which in hindsight was a weird cursed combo. We were at this birthday thing in a bowling alley, one of those old ones with fried food, sticky floors, and neon lights that buzz like they're barely holding it together. I wasn't even trying to meet anyone that night. I was mostly there for the cheese fries and free beer from the birthday guy's tap. But Katie was in the lane next to mine, and she was kind of hard to miss. I'd laugh, wore all black with bright red sneakers, top trash every time someone missed a pin. At one point, she turned to me mid-frame and said, "You bowl like someone who writes Yelp reviews." I had no comeback. She grinned, tossed a strike, then strutted back to her seat like she was born to be a menace. I was weirdly into it. We talked a bit that night, just dumb banter between turns, and she asked for my number before she left. I was surprised, honestly. I wasn't even sure if she liked me or just liked bullying me for fun, but I gave it to her anyway. She texted the next day with, "Let's grab drinks before I lose interest," and I kind of respected the chaos of it. We met at this rooftop bar downtown a few nights later. The kind of place where the drinks all have one-word names like drift or static and come with some weird foam or smoke involved. I showed up in my usual plain t-shirt and jacket combo. She walked in wearing this oversized blazer, silver rings on every finger, and a "don't mess with me unless you're entertaining" look on her face. We ordered drinks. She got something with mezcal that tasted like a haunted campfire. I got a whiskey soda, and we sat near the edge where you could see the lights of the city blinking like they were just trying their best. First half hour was actually solid. She told me about her job, marketing, her roommate's dog that she hates, and how she once got banned from Twitter for arguing with a guy who posted conspiracy theories about squirrels. I laughed way more than I expected. She had that kind of energy where you feel like you've known her longer than you have. Sharp, fast, unpredictable. It kept me on my toes. Then things got weird. We were talking about friend groups, just casually, and I mentioned my friend Joe. Said we'd known each other since college. She's hilarious, helped me through a bunch of stuff when my mom was sick. I wasn't even saying anything dramatic, just answering a question about the people in my life. But Katie suddenly stopped sipping her drink and narrowed her eyes like I just said I collect dolls. She goes, "Wait, Joe's a girl." I said, "Yeah." Then she tilts her head, takes a long pause, and says, "Are you sleeping with her?" Just like that. No hesitation. Full serious face. I blinked. Thought she was joking. Smiled, waiting for the punchline. But she wasn't laughing. I said, "No, we're just friends. Have been for years." Katie nodded slowly, then said, That's what guys always say right before you find out they've hooked up at least once." I laughed awkwardly and said, "Not in this case. We've never been like that." She didn't drop it. She started asking weirdly specific questions, like, "Have you ever seen her in her pajamas? Does she call you when she's drunk? Do you hug her for more than 3 seconds?" I tried to answer them like a normal person, but the vibe was shifting fast. She was grilling me like I was on trial. I told her again calmly that Joe was just a friend, that I had female friends my whole life, that it's not that deep. And then Katie hits me with, "I don't date guys who have female friends. It's a boundary. Too much drama. Too many blurred lines." I just sat there for a second like, wait, what? She went on this whole rant about how platonic friendships are mostly a lie, and how women always keep guys around just in case. She said the only reason any woman would stay friends with a guy for that long is if there's an emotional leash involved, whatever that means. I asked if she really thought men and women couldn't be just friends, and she said, not unless one of them is ugly or in a relationship. Otherwise, there's always tension. I genuinely didn't know how to respond to that. I wasn't even mad, just confused. I told her I wasn't going to drop a longtime friend just because of some made-up rule. She rolled her eyes and said, "It's not made up, it's just evolved dating standards." Then she asked if Joe had ever had a boyfriend. I said, yeah, a few. She asked if they were okay with her being friends with me. I said, I assume so, I'm not part of their relationship. And she hit back with, exactly. That's how sneaky stuff happens. At this point, I'd mentally checked out. I just stared into my glass, watching the ice melt while she explained that if I really respected boundaries, I'd phase Joe out if things got serious between us. I told her I wouldn't cut people out of my life like that. She said, then you're not ready for a real relationship. And I realized in that moment, this wasn't going anywhere. I was being prejudged for having a friend, and the worst part was that there wasn't even a story. No drama, no sketchy history. Just a regular friendship she couldn't accept because it didn't fit her version of the world. We sat in silence for a bit. She scrolled through her phone, probably deciding whether to ghost me now or later. I finished my drink and stood up. Said it was probably better if we called it a night. She didn't argue. As I walked to the elevator, she called out, "Tell Joe I said hi, unless she's busy sitting in her lap or something." I didn't turn around. Got home, called Joe, told her the whole thing. She laughed so hard she dropped her AirPods. Then she said, "Some people really do make dating harder than it needs to be." I agreed. This happened during that weird post-holiday slump when your brain is still foggy from eating nothing but casseroles and cookies for 2 weeks. I was back in town after visiting family and feeling like I should at least try to be social again. I deleted all my dating apps before the holidays, but somehow Tinder wormed its way back onto my phone while I was in line at the DMV, half distracted and bored. That's how Mark happened. His profile looked normal. Some hiking photos, a blurry picture with a dog that may or may not have been his. A quote from someone I didn't recognize that said, "The truth isn't always popular, but it's always right." At the time, I chalked that up to cheesy wisdom, not a red flag. He messaged me first, something like, "You seem like someone who appreciates depth." I didn't, but whatever, I was bored. We agreed to grab lunch at a place he picked. This casual bistro with big windows and minimalist furniture, like it was designed to look good on Pinterest, but still serve food that people pretend is healthy. I got there first and grabbed a table near the window. He walked in about 5 minutes later wearing a polo shirt tucked into jeans, the kind of tucked that says, "I plan to explain something to you whether you asked or not." He was tall, decent looking, and polite enough. Shook my hand like we were about to sign paperwork, then sat down and asked if I'd ever tried bone broth. Not as a casual mention, like he started with that. I said I hadn't, and he launched into this mini lecture about how it's a forgotten pillar of health. I was barely halfway through the menu but already regretting things. We ordered. I went with a chicken sandwich. He got some kind of meat-heavy plate and asked the waiter if the chicken was local and ethically slaughtered. I looked up from the menu and saw the waiter's soul leave his body. Once the server left, Mark wasted no time. Not even 5 minutes in, and he asks, "So where do you land politically?" Like it was a completely normal first date question, right up there with "what do you do?" or "what's your favorite movie?" I tried to laugh it off. I said something like, "Wow, jumping right into it, huh?" And he said, "Better to know early than waste time." I gave a vague answer, just to test the waters. So I leaned progressive but tried to stay open-minded. His face twitched slightly like he smelled something off. He nodded and said, "Interesting," which anyone with a brain knows never means interesting. He launched into his whole thing. Said he used to be on the fence, but now he sees through the noise. Said too many people were emotionally reactive instead of logically grounded. I asked what that meant, and he said, "People get offended instead of examining facts." Okay, sure. I tried to steer things back to neutral ground. Asked him what he liked to do outside of work, favorite books, music, but he kept yanking us back to politics like we were bungee jumping into a Twitter argument. He had opinions. Big ones. About everything. Government overreach, parenting, how society is crumbling because we reward weakness. I was nodding just to keep the conversation moving until he suddenly hit me with, "Where do you stand on kids?" It wasn't casual. He asked it like a job interview question. I told him I wasn't sure, that I wasn't against the idea if I didn't feel a pressing need either way. I was being honest. I said I was still figuring it out. He just stared at me for a second like I told him I eat cereal with water. Then he said, "Women who don't want kids are emotionally broken." I blinked. He went on, "It's not judgment. It's psychology. There's a natural order to things. When women disconnect from that, they lose their core purpose." Then, with complete seriousness, he added, "That's when society starts to fall apart." I looked around like I was being pranked. The table next to us was two girls sharing a slice of quiche, probably on a study break, and I wanted to scream, "Do you hear this?" But no, just me, Mark, and his TED Talk on woman destiny. I asked him, "So you think a woman not wanting kids is a threat to society?" He nodded. "It creates instability. Emotionally and culturally. We need women to nurture. It's how balance is maintained." I could feel my eyebrows trying to leave my face. I said, "You do realize not every woman is wired the same, right?" He shrugged. "They think they're not, but that's conditioning. It's not natural to reject motherhood. That's trauma or ideology talking." I sat there, slowly chewing my sandwich, wondering how fast I could leave without making a scene. But he kept going. He had stats, or at least what he claimed were stats. Something about birth rates and depression and how modern feminism was responsible for emotional dislocation. He said that last part like he just made it on the spot and was proud of it. Then to cap it all off, he leaned in and said, "But you don't strike me as lost. I think you make a great mom if you found the right structure." I didn't even respond. I just stared at him, debating whether to throw my drink in his face or pour it down my own throat in hopes of forgetting the last 30 minutes. When the check came, he reached for it and said, "I'll pay. I still believe in traditional values." I told him I was paying for my own, just to keep the patriarchy from getting any points that night. He stood up, buttoned his polo like he'd just wrapped up a business deal, and said, "If you ever decide you want to build something real, let me know." I said sugar and walked straight to the parking lot like it was a finish line. I got in my car, sat in the driver's seat, and let out the biggest exhale of my life. Then I texted my friend who dared me to start dating again and wrote, "He said I was broken because I don't have a baby craving. You owe me cake." The night started normal. Too normal, honestly. Like one of those dates where everything is just kind of average in a way that's almost comforting. The restaurant was this modern Italian place with white tablecloths and candles that smelled like vanilla and self-doubt. I'd been there once before on a birthday dinner where someone dropped a glass and the whole place applauded. I remember the pasta being solid, the chairs a little stiff, and the vibe very we don't do substitutions. I met Olivia on Bumble, and our chats had been clean and efficient. Not boring, but not exactly thrilling either. She used complete sentences, no weird abbreviations, and actually asked questions that weren't copy-paste stuff like, "What are you looking for?" Her profile was polished, almost suspiciously so. Every picture looked professionally lit. She had one where she was standing on a mountain, one sitting in front of a huge bookshelf, one with her friends all laughing at something off camera. There was no way to tell if she was chill or exhausting, but she seemed sweet. Her bio said INTJ. Type 1. Sushi addict. Give me structure or give me death. I didn't fully get it, but I respect someone who knows what they want, I guess. So we set the date. She picked the place. She made the reservation. She texted me earlier that afternoon just to confirm the time. Part of me liked the organization. Another part of me wondered if she was going to ask me to fill out a post-date survey. She arrived on time, wearing a blazer over a floral dress, and walked like she was late for a conference call. She smiled when she saw me and said, "Thanks for being punctual, like it was a test I passed." I laughed and said, "Of course, even though I just barely beat traffic by cutting off a minivan and praying for green lights." We sat down, ordered drinks, and things started off easy enough. She was polite, asked about my job, told me about hers, project manager at a tech company, obviously. She said she liked lists and systems and disliked small talk and astrology. I told her I liked breakfast food and hating movies everyone else loves. We laughed at the same parts of the menu. Everything felt fine. Just fine. We ordered pasta. I got something with mushrooms and garlic. She got the truffle risotto and said, "Truffle is my love language." I smiled, trying not to overthink how many times she probably used that line. Then the drinks came, and she pulled out her phone. "Okay," she said, setting it between us on the table like a tiny, glowing referee. "I know this is weird, but I have something kind of fun." I raised an eyebrow. She grinned. "It's a compatibility quiz. Just 20 questions. My therapist gave it to me after my last breakup. I've used it on like 3 dates now, and it's surprisingly accurate." I thought she was kidding, or at least half kidding. But she opened the link, turned the screen toward me, and said, "Just answer honestly. It's anonymous until the end. Then it compares our answers." Now, I'm all for games, personality stuff, whatever. But this was different. She wasn't just curious. She was serious. She was holding the phone like it was a lie detector test, and I was the suspect. I hesitated. She said, "You're not scared, are you?" Which is exactly how people get talked into doing karaoke and regretting it forever. So I said, "Sure, let's do it." First few questions were harmless. Stuff like, do you consider yourself more logical or emotional? Or would you rather spend a night in or go to a crowded party? I picked my answers. She picked hers. We compared after each one. She'd nod or say interesting like she was mentally adding up points. But then the questions got weirder. How do you handle confrontation in romantic relationships? How important is physical touch to you? If your partner didn't meet your emotional needs, would you say something immediately or wait and observe? I said, "This is starting to feel like a job interview for being your boyfriend." She just smiled and said, "Good. That means it's working." At one point she asked, "How often do you cry?" And I made a joke about only during Pixar movies and when the microwave beeps before I'm ready. She didn't laugh. She just said, "So, not often." When the food arrived, she paused the quiz. We ate in relative silence. She didn't talk much while eating, which would have been fine, except she was watching me eat like it was part of the data collection. After a few bites, she pulled the phone back out and said, "We're almost done." I thought we finished. We had not. Final few questions were straight up wild. One was, would you stay with a partner who wanted an open relationship, but you didn't? Another one said, how much do you value being right in an argument? I read it out loud, and she said, "Don't lie on that one. Everyone wants to be right." When we got to the end, she gets submit and waited like we were about to get our Hogwarts houses. The screen loaded. I held my breath. She smiled. 78%. I shrugged. That's not bad. She frowned. Actually, she said, I usually go do second dates unless it's at least 80. I blinked. You're joking, right? She shook her head. It's not personal. It's just what works for me. 78 is kind of borderline. My last relationship was with a 72, and it was a disaster. I sat there confused. So if it had said 82, we'd be planning the next one. She nodded like it made perfect sense. I said, you ever think maybe people aren't in math? She smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. People are patterns. You just have to find the right ones. I didn't argue. I just finished my pasta, paid my half, and walked out with the kind of quiet frustration you can't even put into words right away. Later that night, she sent a follow-up text. You're lovely, just not a fit for me long term. Hope you find someone with compatible answers. I never replied. But I did take the quiz again by myself the next day. Changed a few answers. Got an 83. Guess I'm ready for love now. The thing about dating apps is that you start lowering the bar without realizing it. At first, you're swiping left on guys who use fish photos. Then it's guys who call themselves sapio. Before you know it, you're agreeing to go out with someone just because they didn't use the word vibe unironically. That's how I ended up going on a date with Moss. Yeah, Moss, not a nickname, not short for anything, just Moss. He messaged me with honest question. Are you emotionally self-aware or just good at pretending to be? Which is a weird opener, sure, but at least it wasn't hey, and his profile wasn't terrible. He had a clean haircut, normal clothes, and a dog that looked like it had its own Instagram account. He described himself as data-driven but not dead inside, which I paid more attention to because, wow, that turned out to be a whole thing. We made plans to meet at this ramen spot downtown that always smells like soy sauce and miracles. I liked it because you could slurp your noodles in peace and not feel like you were being watched. Low lighting, no music loud enough to yell over, tables close enough to feel cozy but not crowded. I got there first, grabbed a booth, and started sipping the free water like I was prepping for a marathon. Moss showed up right on time, wearing a black turtleneck like he was auditioning for a TED Talk. He sat down, smiled, and said, "You look like your photos." That's rare. I wasn't sure if that was supposed to be a compliment or a roast, so I just said thanks. We ordered our food and started talking. He was intense but not unpleasant. Spoke fast like his thoughts were always one step ahead of his mouth. Told me about his job, something with UX design and behavior modeling, which I nodded along till I understood even half of it. He was sharp, asked a lot of questions, didn't interrupt. I was honestly enjoying myself until the conversation took a weird turn. About halfway through the meal, he pulled his phone out, not to check a text, but like he was about to show me something important. He tilted the screen toward me and said, "Okay, so I know this is a little extra, but it's been helpful." On the screen was a spreadsheet. Not a list, not notes, a spreadsheet. Color-coded, labeled tabs, scroll bar visible. I blinked. He said, "So I've been dating more intentionally this year, and I've been tracking patterns. Helps me figure out compatibility based on behavior, communication style, and initial impressions." I said, "Is that me?" He grinned. "Well, not yet. But if you're open to it, I can tell you where you're landing so far." I thought he was joking. I laughed. He didn't. He tapped the screen and scrolled. I saw tabs labeled first impressions, follow through, conversation flow, and this one burned into my brain, X factor/gut feelings. He said I was already outperforming his last 3 dates in response time and eye contact. Eye contact. As if I was being graded like a public speaking final. I asked him, "So wait, you actually rank people?" He nodded, completely serious. "It's not about judgment. It's about alignment. I think too many people go into dating blind. I'm just organizing what I'm learning." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He told me the highest anyone had scored was 87%, and that person coasted him. The lowest was 42%, and he still gave her a second date because she was high in potential but low in presence. I didn't even know what that meant. He kept talking, flipping between cells on his spreadsheet like he was showing me photos of his kid. Told me how he scores based on categories: intellectual curiosity, emotional openness, reciprocal question asking, ability to sit with silence, sense of humor. I asked how you even quantify that stuff, and he said, "It's not perfect, but I'm refining it." Then he looked me in the eye and said, "Right now you're tracking around a 74.5. I put my chopsticks down. I asked, "And what number do I need to get a second date?" He said, "I don't have a hard cutoff, but ideally over 78. Though honestly, it's not just about the number. It's about trajectory." I stared at him like I was in a documentary about people who accidentally join cults. He said I could absolutely gain points by being vulnerable or expressing future-minded thinking. I asked, "What if I said this whole thing makes me uncomfortable?" And he replied, "That would be a transparency bonus, but a compatibility concern." I was trying to keep it together, but I felt like I was being interviewed by someone who wanted to both marry me and file me in a drawer. He said, "You're scoring high in calm demeanor. That bodes well for domestic harmony." I said, "Are you serious right now?" And he just smiled and said, "I know it's unconventional." I asked if he showed the spreadsheet to all his dates. He said no, only the ones he saw long-term potential with. Then he looked at me dead serious and said, "You're one of the few who made it past the intuition checkpoint." I excused myself to go to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror for a full minute. Like, is this real? Am I part of some dating experiment for people who don't believe in instincts? I considered leaving, but I figured I at least deserved to finish my noodles before disappearing from his color-coded matrix. When I got back to the table, he was adding a note in his phone. I didn't ask what it said. We'd wrapped up soon after. He paid, which I appreciated, and said, "I'll update your metrics later tonight and let you know where we land." I said, "Can't wait," with the fakest smile I've ever produced. I never heard from him again, probably because I tanked in future-oriented dialogue or laugh-to-joke ratio. Or maybe I just didn't want to be a cell in someone's love spreadsheet. I swear, I wasn't even trying to go on a date that week. It had been one of those long stretches where everything just feels off. My sleep was weird. My fridge had nothing in it but a bag of carrots and 3 kinds of mustard. And I kept getting stuck behind people at the grocery store who wanted to pay with exact change. It wasn't a good week for connection, is what I'm saying. But then Mia messaged me. We'd matched a while back, I think. She had this very sharp energy in her photos. Like you could just tell she was the kind of person who wears real shoes to the airport and doesn't let people cut her in line. Her bio said, high standards, low patience, and I don't know what was wrong with me, but that sounded kind of exciting at the time. She messaged me out of nowhere on a Wednesday, just said, dinner Friday. Not, how are you, not, what are you into, just those 2 words. I kind of respected it. I said, sure. She picked the place. This super clean, modern little Korean barbecue spot on the east side, where you grill your own meat and the lighting is so flattering it makes everyone look 10% more well-rested. I got there early. The host asked if I wanted to wait at the bar, and I said no. I just awkwardly linger by the front like I always do. Mia showed up on time, all in black, wearing boots with heels that clacked loud enough to make people turn and look. She smiled at me but didn't say hi right away, just walked straight to the host and said, reservation near Mia. We got seated, and I realized fast that this wasn't going to be a laid-back vibe. She didn't do small talk. She skipped right over names and jobs and asked, what's the worst thing someone's ever said to you in a relationship? I blinked. Tried to play it off with a laugh. She didn't laugh back, just stared at me like we were in an interrogation room. I said I wasn't sure, maybe something about not being present enough. She nodded like she was scoring my answer on a clipboard only she could see. She did that thing where she leaned forward slightly every time she spoke, like her words needed to arrive with emphasis. I asked her what she did for work, and she said, office stuff. I'm not one of those people who defines myself by it, which sounded cool until 5 minutes later when she went on a rant about how men who aren't ambitious are basically dead weight. We ordered food. She grilled the meat herself. Didn't even offer to let me try. Just took control of the tongs and said, I like it done a certain way, which, fair. The beef was good. The conversation, not so much. Somewhere between the short ribs and the kimchi pancakes, she hit me with, do you cry? I was chewing, so I kind of raised an eyebrow at her. She repeated it. Do you cry? Ever? I said, yeah, sometimes, because, I'm a functioning human. I didn't give details. Didn't mention my grandpa's funeral or that one time I cried during a Pixar short. Just said yes. She sighed. Like an actual sigh. Loud, disappointed, leaned back in her chair kind of sigh. Then she said, I can't date guys who cry. It's a personal boundary. I asked why, mostly out of disbelief. She said, it makes me feel like I have to parent them. It's not attractive. I need someone stable. I said, crying isn't the same thing as instability, right? And she goes, it's all connected. Emotional control is everything. I didn't even know what to say to that. I tried to pivot back to something lighter, maybe talk about movies or books, but she wasn't done. She smiled, this slow, weird little smile, and said, I have a test. I didn't ask what kind of test. I should have. She set down her chopsticks, took a sip of her drink, and launched into this story. A very detailed story about her dog dying. Like, not just my dog passed away kind of story. I mean graphic details. The symptoms. The hospital visit. The exact moment his breathing changed. She described the sound. She described how his eyes looked. She told me what the vet said in a flat voice, like she was reading from a script she'd memorized. I was frozen, not sad yet. Just stuck between, is she okay? And am I being punked? She finished the story and stared at me. No expression. Just watched. I said, I'm really sorry, that's awful. She nodded slowly, still watching me. Then said, you didn't tear up. That's good. I sat there stunned. She explained like it was nothing, that she tells that story on first dates to see how people react. That if someone cries, she knows they're emotionally weak. If someone gets distant or uncomfortable, she says they lack empathy. And if someone sits through it calmly and just acknowledges it, that's the sweet spot, she said. That means they're regulated. I couldn't believe I was sitting there being evaluated like a contestant on some reality show called Are You Emotionally Safe Enough for Mia? I asked if anyone ever got upset by that story. She said, yeah, once a guy left the restaurant, which was also helpful, she added. Saved me the trouble. At that point, I was halfway done with my second drink and completely done with the date. I finished what was left on my plate just so I didn't have to make eye contact. She kept talking. Said most people aren't self-aware enough to pass for filters. That shit doesn't waste time on soft men. I didn't even know what that meant anymore. I just wanted to go home and lie face down on the floor. The check came. She asked if we could split it, then added, not because I believe in that equality nonsense. I just like to end things balanced. I paid for the whole thing just to leave faster. She didn't argue. Outside, she hugged me, tight, like we were old friends or soldiers who'd survived something. Then she said, "You did better than most." I walked to my car and sat there for a few minutes, hands on the wheel, brain static. She hadn't even asked me anything normal. No, where are you from? No, what's your favorite song? Just emotional screenings and grief tests like a dating obstacle course. Blocked her number the next morning, then cried while watching a dog rescue video on YouTube. Not because I'm unstable, because I'm human.